6-16. The Jewish nation, for the honor of which they were so jealous, was very inconsiderable in its beginnings, as their common father Abraham was fetched out of obscurity in Ur of the Chaldees, so their tribes, and the heads of them, were fetched out of servitude in Egypt, when they were the fewest of all people. Do. 7:7. And what need is there of so much ado, as if their ruin, when they bring it upon themselves by sin, must be the ruin of the world, and of all God's interests in it? No, he that brought them out of Egypt can bring them into it again, as he threatened, do 28:68, and yet be no loser, while he can out of stones raise up children unto Abraham. 2. The slow steps by which the promise made to Abraham advanced towards the performance, and the many seeming contradictions here taken notice of, plainly show that it had a spiritual meaning, and that the land principally intended to be conveyed and secured by it was the better country, that is, the heavenly, as the apostle shows from this very argument that the patriarchs sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, thence inferring that they looked for a city that had foundations. Hebrew 11:9, 10. It was therefore no blasphemy to say, Jesus shall destroy this place, when at the same time we say, he shall lead us to the heavenly Canaan, and put us in possession of that, of which the earthly Canaan was but a type and figure. The building up of the family of Abraham, with the entail of divine grace upon it, and the disposals of divine providence concerning it, which take up the rest of the book of Genesis. First, God engaged to be a God to Abraham and his seed, and, in token of this, appointed that he and his male seed should be circumcised, General 17:9, 10. He gave him the covenant of circumcision, that is, the covenant of which circumcision was the seal, and accordingly, when Abraham had a son born, he circumcised him the 8th day, v8, by which he was both bound by the divine law and interested in the divine promise, for circumcision had reference to both, being a seal of the covenant both on God's part I will be to thee a God all-sufficient, and on man's part walk before me, and be thou perfect. And then when effectual care was thus taken for the securing of Abraham's seed, to be a seed to serve the Lord, they began to multiply. Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob the 12 patriarchs, or roots of the respective tribes. Secondly, Joseph, the darling and blessing of his father's house, was abused by his brethren. They envied him because of his dreams, and sold him into Egypt. Thus early did the children of Israel begin to grudge those among them that were eminent and outshone others, of which their enmity to Christ, who, like Joseph, was a Nazarite among his brethren, was a great instance. Thirdly, God owned Joseph in his troubles, and was with him, General 39:2, 21, by the influence of his Spirit, both on his mind, giving him comfort, and on the minds of those he was concerned with, giving him favor in their eyes. And thus at length he delivered him out of his afflictions, and Pharaoh made him the second man in the kingdom, PS 105:2022. And thus he not only arrived at great preferment among the Egyptians, but became the shepherd and stone of Israel, General 49:24. Fourthly, Jacob was compelled to go down into Egypt, by a famine which forced him out of Canaan, a dearth, which was a great affliction, to that degree that our fathers found no sustenance in Canaan, v11. That fruitful land was turned into barrenness. But, hearing that there was corn in Egypt, treasured up by the wisdom of his own son, he sent out our fathers first to fetch corn, v12. And the second time that they went, Joseph, who at first made himself strange to them, made himself known to them, and it was notified to Pharaoh that they were Joseph's kindred and had a dependence upon him, v13, whereupon, with Pharaoh's leave, Joseph sent for his father Jacob to him into Egypt, with all his kindred and family, to the number of 75 souls, to be subsisted there, v13. In Genesis they are said to be 70 souls, General 46:27. But the Septuagint there makes them 75, and Stephen or Luke follows that version, as Lu 3:36, where Canaan is inserted, which is not in the Hebrew text, but in the Septuagint. Some, by excluding Joseph and his sons, who were in Egypt before, which reduces the number to 64, and adding the sons of the 11 patriarch, make the number 75. Fifthly, Jacob and his sons died in Egypt, v. 15, but were carried over to be buried in Canaan, v. 16. A very considerable difficulty occurs here. It is said, they were carried over into Shechem, whereas Jacob was buried not in Shechem, but near Hebron, in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Isaac were buried, General 50:13. Joseph's bones indeed were buried in Shechem, Jos 24:32, and it seems by this, though it is not mentioned in the story, that the bones of all the other patriarchs were carried with his, each of them giving the same commandment concerning them that he had done, and of them this must be understood, not of Jacob himself. But then the sepulchre in Shechem was bought by Jacob, General 33:19, and by this it is described, Jos 24:32. How then is it here said to be bought by Abraham? Dr. Whitby's solution of this is very sufficient. He supplies it thus: Jacob went down into Egypt and died, he and our fathers, and our fathers, were carried over into Shechem, and he, that is, Jacob, was laid in the sepulchre that Abraham brought for a sum of money, General 23:16. Or, they were laid there, that is, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they, namely, the other patriarchs, were buried in the sepulchre bought of the sons of Emer, the father of Shechem. Let us now see what this is to Stephen's purpose. He still reminds them of the mean beginning of the Jewish nation, as a check to their priding themselves in the glories of that nation, and that it was by a miracle of mercy that they were raised up out of nothing to what they were, from so small a number to be so great a nation. But, if they answer not the intention of their being so raised, they can expect no other than to be destroyed. The prophets frequently put them in mind of the bringing of them out of Egypt, as an aggravation of their contempt of the law of God, and here it is urged upon them as an aggravation of their contempt of the gospel of Christ. He reminds them likewise of the wickedness of those that were the patriarchs of their tribes, in envying their brother Joseph, and selling him into Egypt, and the same spirit was still working in them towards Christ and his ministers. Their holy land, which they doted so much upon, their fathers were long kept out of the possession of, and met with dearth and great affliction in it, and therefore let them not think it strange if, after it has been so long polluted with sin, it be at length destroyed. The faith of the patriarchs in desiring to be buried in the land of Canaan plainly showed that they had an eye to the heavenly country, to which it was the design of this Jesus to lead them.